wrote this book. It's a fiction. It's pretty hilarious. The Autobiography of Charlie Lord by Bill Wetmore. Bill Wetmore is a Californian by the way of New Jersey and Connecticut. As a high school track and cross-country runner, he made a better wrestler. He attended the University of Connecticut, where he majored in English and softball. He began writing the autobiography of Charlie Lord nearly 35 years ago, but put it aside to focus on becoming a kind, decent, and loving father to 6 savage children. In his free time, he loves playing with fire. Am I reading this correctly? Okay. This is his first published novel. Welcome, Bill. Doesn't look like a pyromaniac.
My first house on fire when I was 5.
Oh, God.
Okay, so listen fast. This is Charlie is 17 when he was a senior in high school. And it's a chapter called Matsumoto. Charlie is half Japanese. My class in current affairs was held in a windowless basement room that also doubled as an atomic bomb shelter. In the event of a nuclear attack, 211 students, 22 teachers, 3 administrators, 2 secretaries, and 1 janitor were supposed to seek safety in this room. In reality, the room was barely large enough to hold the 15 students comprising the class. Most of the room space was devoted to cans of Spam, bottles of distilled water, and boxes of medical supplies. There was even a 55-gallon drum of clam chowder that the Mythic Rotary had purchased from some Navy surplus outlet store and had donated to the school several years earlier. A faded label on the side of the drum indicated that the chowder's shelf life had expired in 1965, and the drum was beginning to rust and swell. In spite of the drum's condition, it not only remained in the classroom, but had been rolled to the front of the room by the current affairs teacher, Mr. Lincoln Matsumoto. Rather than sit at his desk, Mr. Matsumoto liked to stand behind the drum and deliver his lectures on subjects ranging from atomic energy to zero population growth. Perhaps it was my imagination, but it sometimes seemed to me that Matsumoto intentionally avoided his desk, even though the rest of the room was cluttered with textbooks, papers, and survival supplies. The top of Matsumoto's desk was completely bare. Most likely, Mr. Matsumoto was just one of those people who didn't like to stay rooted behind the desk, especially one that could be transformed into a mortician's lab in the aftermath of a nuclear explosion. The walls behind the desk were lined with shelves that were full of the various fluids and instruments needed to embalm up to a dozen medium-sized humans. These happy objects had been donated to the school by the local mortician, Joey Schapp's father, Wendell. Joey sat next to me in this class, and even though I was getting an F in current affairs, Joey insisted on copying my answers from the weekly multiple choice quizzes that Mr. Matsumoto administered. Once I made the mistake of asking Joey why he needed to cheat in order to get an F. Validation, said Joey, validation and loyalty. I'd feel pretty bad if either of us was to get the lowest score on one of these quizzes. After all, Charlie, you're my only friend. What are you talking about, Joey? Rochi's your friend, isn't he? I'm his dealer, said Joey. It's an entirely different dynamic once you throw money into the mix. You're the only person who talks to me. You're crazy, Joey. Jakey Jervis talks to you all the time. Yeah, said Joey, but I don't listen. I don't listen, so Jakey doesn't count. There's Daryl Board, I said. He picks you up in the morning and drives you to school and drives you home. You two gotta be friends. Nah, as Joey said, I'm kind of ashamed to admit I'm just using Daryl. I pretend we're friends. I give him free pot. I talk to him. Every action I perform in regards to Daryl indicates that we're friends. But there's a spot in my mind that knows it's all fake. Wait a second, I said. Everything you do indicates you two are friends, but because you think it's fake, it's actually fake. "Yes," said Joey. "I'm ashamed about it, but not really." "Fascinating, Joey. You're creating new categories of relationships while we're sitting here." "Whatever, Charlie. Anyways, if you're not doing anything this weekend, want to come over? We can do acid and look at dead bodies." No, I had no desire to drop acid again or look at dead bodies in Mr. Schaff's mortuary. Mr. Matsumoto's class in current affairs gave me more than enough dead bodies to handle. Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Attica, Vietnam, Vietnam, Vietnam. Mr. Matsumoto stood behind his clam chowder lectern and spoke about My Lai, Kent State, Biafra, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Detroit, current affairs as end of days, history transformed into revelation. Each afternoon, Mr. Matsumoto stood before the class and enumerated the threats facing mankind: pestilence, war, famine, pollution, mercury and tuna fish, DDT and mother's milk. Somewhere in Ohio, a river caught fire. In between these monologues of recent and impending destruction, Matsumoto would occasionally fall silent, and turning his back to the class, he'd study the shelf full of bombing materials. Invariably, when he turned back to face us, he would begin telling some pointless story about his childhood in Salinas, California. Both his parents had been immigrants. They purchased a farm. At the age of 12, he worked a tuna boat out of Monterey. During the war, he watched his mother die of cholera in a relocation camp outside of Los Angeles. These stories would end as abruptly as they'd begun, and Matsumoto would recommence his soliloquies on Haiphong Harbor and missile gaps. Lincoln was a small man, no taller than 5'5", and the clam chowder lecturer had seemed even smaller somehow. Even his voice seemed small. It drifted across the classroom to us as though it were composed of particles of dust or twilight. It was one of those voices that you had to pay real close attention to, or you missed what he was saying or trying to say. Sometimes it was one of those voices you couldn't decipher no matter how closely you listened to it. So it wasn't particularly surprising that hardly anyone in class took notes or paid attention to anything that Matsumoto had to say. Some of the students would read or study for their other classes. Some of the students, like Willie Wetmore, would skip most of the classes entirely. "Why should I go to class?" Willie asked. "So long as I read the newspaper and watch Face the Nation, I can pass the Monday morning quiz. Plus most of the grade is based on our term paper, and I'll ace that." Willie was one of the laziest smart guys I knew. He wrestled a weight class above me and was good enough to lose to the best wrestlers in the area by a point or two. If he worked as hard as I did, he'd have been a state champ, but he didn't care. He ran the quarter mile on the track team and had blazing speed, but spent most of the practice in the foam rubber high jump pit, making out with Cheryl and Rebecca Sims, the discus throwers on the girls' track team. Like the Patel twins, Cheryl and Rebecca were also conjoined. Cheryl was white, Rebecca was black. They were both big and beautiful and joined at the pelvis up to their ribs. Unlike VJ and Ash Neal, the Sims girls only had 2 arms and 2 legs. Cheryl's whiteness and Rebecca's blackness were both most noticeable in each of their extremities, like their head, arms, and legs. Their skin color blended to an overall mocha once it reached their torsos. They shared a kidney and stomach, and according to Willie, they also shared external genitalia. "I really like Cheryl," said Willie, "but it just doesn't seem right to leave Rebecca out." The coaches left Willie alone. He'd run a sub-50-second quarter mile, so pretty much could do anything he wanted. In a lot of ways, I wished I was more like him. Bold, confident, cavalier. He had a way of entering any room and immediately becoming the center of attention. It worked for him. He was as much an asshole as Cale Knight, but there was something likable about him. Like he was aware that he was an asshole and just kept choosing to wear his assholiness as a way of keeping himself amused. He always had a smile on his face that seemed ironic and self-referential. Unlike Willie, I liked current affairs. Even though I was getting an F, it was my favorite class. I looked forward to it. Perhaps I'll finish the sentence. Perhaps all of Mr. Matsumoto's discourses on the decay of urban America and the greenhouse effect made me forget, if only temporarily, all the frustrations and fears rampant in my own life.
question for Bill? Don't we want to know how autobiographical this is?
They say fiction is the youngest lie. So it's completely autobiographical and completely not.
So you're a part of a conjoined twin?
I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated by the idea of conjoined twins. When I was in college, I actually wrote some papers about, like, in literature, like doubles in literature. So people who were this and not this. So the whole idea of twinness has always been interesting.
So I'm his daughter, and as he's worked on this book for 35 years, I've heard these stories growing up my whole life. And the question that has been haunting me for years is, are you Charlie Lord or are you Willie Wetmore?
Well, both and neither.
Is good with the answers. Oh.
I'm curious to know what you like to read.
What do I like to read? I read like weird, it's like, I don't really read fiction very much. Mostly I read science stuff. That's like, I'll get interested in something, subject will fall into it. It could be about, a math equation or something. It's like, it could be about anything, but I don't really read a lot of fiction.
Another question for Bill?
So what do you do professionally?
I'm in sales.
Everybody is so curious about this mystery that's not a mystery. Okay, one last question.
So, in the current events of today, how do you keep your sense of humor?
Well, you don't think it's humorous? What's going on? This is hysterical what's happening in this country right now.
Because then we have to deal with it for a couple more years.
We may have, until 2024 then.
Oh, no.
If you really think about this. I see the absurdity in a lot of stuff. And it's like, it's tragic. It's funny and it's tragic at the same time. And that's what makes poignancy in literature and in the world.
Good job.